Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Barbara Žvoko, the permanent representative of Slovenia to the international organizations in Vienna, and I will be moderating today's event. I would like to welcome you all to the discussion on the concept of social and emotional learning that can act as a systematic prevention approach, and it's not merely an intervention. I would also like to inform you that this event is being recorded. On the margins of last year's CND, Slovenia has organized a side event on the importance of drug use prevention in the time of cannabis regulation. And I remember this was the last event before the pandemic. We were still able to hold an in-person event in the Vienna International Center with over 100 participants. During this session of the CND, all side events are organized virtually, but we can view this also from positive sides, since it allows for a broader public participation and a bigger amount of side events. Today, for example, at 2 o'clock, we have 9 parallel events. Slovenia is organizing these events together with United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime, UNODC, Lions Clubs International Foundation, as well as the Utrip Institute and the National Institute of Public Health from Slovenia. I'm very pleased that this event has brought together such a variety of representatives of organizations, national, international, and non-governmental, as well as medical specialists. As a parent, I have to say this topic is very close to my heart. When I became a parent and having best friend died of overdose, I was always wondering what I could do as a parent to prevent the same happen to my daughter. Early relationships are important for physical and emotional regulation and being with family relationships. This event aims to provide an insight into core competence areas and key settings of social and emotional learning with regard to successful early prevention. We hope this event will motivate a discussion on how to provide a systemic approach to prevention at several levels within educational, social, and health systems. Social and emotional learning principles have progressed in the last decade in terms of research and practical tools for different target groups. We have witnessed development in parenting skills programs where early prevention starts in kindergarten, and in school-based prevention interventions and programs that strengthen school children's personal and social skills. Our panelists will discuss the perspectives of preventive healthcare and health education and the need to scale up these services for all key target groups. Without further ado, I would like to start the panel discussion now. I'm pleased to welcome speakers with various backgrounds: Mr. Wadih Maalouf from UNODC, Mr. Matthew Kiefer from Lions Clubs International Foundation, Ms. Vesna Pucelj from National Institute of Public Health in Slovenia, psychiatrist and psychotherapist Ms. Breda Jelen Sobočan, and Ms. Sanela Talic from Institute Utrip. Before giving the floor to the first panelist, I would like to inform them that they have 7 minutes available for their presentations. All of you have prepared PowerPoint presentation, and my colleague Anne will be sharing your presentations. Please indicate to him when you want him to move to the next slide. I would also like to inform the audience that there will be time for questions or comments at the end of presentations. So firstly, I would like to welcome Mr. Wadih Maalouf. He holds a PhD in mental health and drug addiction epidemiology from Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. He has extensive experience with drug situation assessment. As a global program coordinator at UNODC, his role is to develop, pilot, and assess the impact of family skills responses in preventing drug use, crime and violence, as well as life skills education responses in schools and in sports settings. Mr. Maalouf, you have the screen.
Madam Chair, Madam Ambassador, thank you very much for the warm welcome and the nice words. Thank you for inviting UNODC to join this wonderful event. Sincere thanks for the permanent mission, for the National Institute of Public Health, for Utrip, as well as for Lions Club for co-organizing. As mentioned, I will talk about social emotional learning in the context of the international standards on drug use prevention, like we're promoting it in all countries where we're engaged in. So if we can move to the next slide. I just want to show first a photo of what the international standards look like. I'm not sure I can control it. Thank you very much. So basically, the international standards were first launched in CND in 2013, but there's a revised version in 2018 that we're also grateful available in so many languages, including in Slovenian, with the support of Utrip. You will see in 2018, the addition is that we have WHO added to the cover, because we have used the WHO criteria in reviewing the science of the evidence, and we recognize the donor state that supported us in its dissemination. Next slide, please. The reason I'm mentioning the standards, and I have 1 minute to describe the standards that we usually work with in 3 days, is that there is a science behind this, and we have used WHO criteria in order to kind of filter that science. There is no need to improvise in terms of what program work and do not work. The other main message is the fact that prevention is more than awareness about drugs. Awareness of drugs is a very small component of it that works in a special subgroup of people. Awareness, fear raising, we're beyond this. And events of saying just say no to drugs assume that in the very young age of vulnerability, there's a free independent choice that a child or a youth can make to say yes or no without assuming the rest of the vulnerability around the child. So basically, the main science that the prevention science advocate for is exactly what this theme of an event is. It's developing the social and emotional learning skill of a child, helping the child at different ages of development have their own intellectual, language, cognitive, emotional, and social competencies needed. And they vary by age. Every age have a different milestone in order to overcome vulnerability. So the point of focus is shifted from the drugs being the problem, how can I address that problem, to really how can I help that individual in different ages of development to grow in a healthy and safe way. So if we move to the next slide, we'll see that this is the main vulnerability work that we work on. Every single person has their own personal characteristics, from genes, from reactivity to stress, to aggressiveness, to attention span, to neurological development. And all of these things are below the skin. And every single person, may be a boy or a girl, have their own personal characteristics. And these people live in different contexts in terms of the microstructure around them, the way they interact with their family, the way their family interacts with them, school, peer influences, and all of this interactivity between the microstructure and the person. But even these microstructures are embedded in a larger structure of that same family could be living in a context of conflict, in a context of social inequalities, of deprivation, of low workforce, of context of availability of violence at the community level, and at the school the same way. So that interactivity between the person, the microstructure around them, and the macrostructure are the things where the prevention focus and the prevention work is going. And there are specific programs that help every single child address their own social and emotional needs, and the structure around them support the individual resilience in order to grow in a healthy and safe way. And that's why an example of, for example, a child that's inattentive, that's have high reactivity to stress, that have poor parental attachment, poor connectivity to school, in living in a context of deprivation, imagine that child as a policymaker, you're addressing that child by just a message of just say no to drugs because drugs are dangerous. That child requires much more than that message. And there are programs that support it. And this is where the social and emotional learning context comes from. Can we move to the next slide, please? So this is in a nutshell what the prevention standard that I described that we have with WHO describe. It comes sometimes for a surprise for certain policymakers that drug prevention, and there are evidence-based drug prevention programs that pass the WHO criteria that can happen prenatally. So basically when the child is still in the womb of the pregnant mother, as well as immediately when the child is born, and then an early adolescence. So basically that social and emotional attendance of the child to grow in a healthy and safe way to prevent substance use in the future can occur very early. And the earlier we can intervene, the better are the outcomes. And probably it's difficult for me to go back in the slides, But it's important to note that that context, what we're talking about, is a context of preventing risky behavior. In my context, as a person promoting prevention of drug use, prevents drug use, but that same program prevents so many different other social and health consequences: mental health, education, improved education, violence against children, and more. And you see that in order to address these different age groups, there are different social structures that can be working with the child to help the child grow in a healthy and safe way, as well as to help their own resilience. I'm not going to talk about the school because I know my colleague Matt, just after me from the Lions Clubs, is going to talk about the social and emotional context of school development. I'm going to focus on the family. We go to the next slide, please. The family is a social institution that really is a powerful institution in the life of the children. These people share genes, share a history, and share a future together. And that's why, if we move to the next slide, when we talk about family skills, we're talking about improving communication, trust, problem-solving skill, conflict resolution between the caregivers and their children. And of course, that interactivity is different at different ages of growth. When the child is first born, you know, there's a need to help the child communicate in the right way when he or she cannot speak, you know, and that reactivity helps the child brain develop in the right way. When the child starts speaking, there's an element of the parental, you know, preparing the child to go to school and helping him or her recognize their own emotions, as well as preparing that child to go to school. Inside the school does not teaches languages, but sometimes do not, you know, teach social interactivity and recognizing the emotions of others and your own emotions, so that you have built these relationships with other people. And this is where family skills is implicated. And this is where what I'm talking about, because when we say family skills in the drug prevention, sometimes the parents, the caregivers are perceived as law enforcement officers watching if their children are using drugs or not. It's beyond this. We're talking about a healthy relationship between a social institution, which is the family, around the child in a healthy and safe way. And this is why they are requiring structured programs. Next slide. So basically, as UNODC, sometimes, you know, the context of our work is like the evidence comes from high-income country. We're working in low-middle-income countries. Our stretch in terms of a global program of implementation across the different countries, and hopefully soon we're communicating with Utrip as well as other governmental counterparts in Slovenia to engage in Slovenia on family skills. This is a universal context. A child, regardless of race, age, ethnicity, requires something from their caregivers. And that science is universal. And we're trying to transport and transform this knowledge from one country to the other to help more and more children. Next slide. So basically, there are evidence-based programs, but in order to promote open source programs and programs that are easy to move to scale, UNODC has engaged with the developers of the evidence-based program to develop two specific packages, let's say. Family United is a package that is universal for a family, regardless of their level of risk, can benefit from. And Strong Family is a program for a family that's living in a context of stress. And then you will see that the context of stress is different, but currently all of us are parenting under stress in the context of COVID-19. And please, if we can move to the next slide, you will see that, you know, we have a diversity of countries where we're implementing, and hopefully also Slovenia and many other countries will benefit from these programs. Next slide. Just to tell you, like in the extreme situation of parenting under stress, we have cases of parenting in Afghanistan for displaced families, as well as refugees that are transiting in Serbia, where we have availed these programs of Strong Families to showcase with the family before they take the program in terms of the level of problematic behavior they have with their kids. And this is the subgroup of kids that were at the risk of this validated scale on the red zone of clinical problems, how after taking the program, you know, they were moving closer to the green line in terms of normalized, and actually 6 weeks after they take the program, how the parental assessment of their own kids have also improved and attenuated this behavior. So you can appreciate in the context of stress, this is feasible. Next slide. So this context of stress, of course, I'm mentioning because now refugees are becoming a big problem, and there's 1.5 billion people now facing refuge. 1 in every 100 persons is a refugee, and that's why UNODC is engaged in terms of supporting parenting in that context as well, because family is the only functioning social institution in this context. Next slide. So you will see there are different packages that we are available, from leaflets to booklets to more engaged programs to programs that engage trauma and parenting skill. Next slide. The reason I'm mentioning also this is in the context of like that experience that we have gathered in terms of engaging with parents in conflict zones as well as in stressful situations. We have recapitulated and reassimilated it in the sense of all of us now are parenting in COVID-19, and may it be directly the virus and its stress, the social context, the social policies around Corona, working from home, school closures, and social physical distancing, all of these are leading to parenting in stressful situation, let alone the social economical impact of COVID-19 is causing job loss of income, are causing a lot of parenting stress, which is in a way also indirectly linked to another mandate that is dear to our heart, which is reducing violence against children and reducing violence. These programs have also been introduced, and they're available also, I have to say, given that we're talking about in a Slovenian context, they're available in Slovenian with the support of Utrip to help families in that context. And Listen First is the campaign that contains these material. Next slide. Also to mention the fact that, at different level of engagement with the parents, we have this is the Listen First has lots of nudging information, which is reminding the parents of the science of care, just being there with your parents with small clips that, really sort of incite taking control. We are glad also, I'm promoting a lot Slovenia, but this is the case that, in engaging in science, these materials in terms of engaging with family are there on the ground. And we hope that the other packages that are more interactive with the families are going to come soon, much like we're doing in many other countries. Next slide. Yeah. So this is just a slide to remind you that social emotional learning doesn't come from one package. There's a series of packages that need to be put in place. The gray line is a line of a comparison group, kids that have been followed up and took nothing in terms of programs. Compared to the green line, these are kids that have taken a program in school on life and social skills, much like the program that my colleague Matt is going to talk about. And you can see its impact in reducing substance use risk in these kids. The blue line is a group of kids that they have used both parenting skills, life skills, and social emotional learning, and then you will social life skills education in school, and you will see the risk of non-medical use of prescription drug, how much it's even multiplied in terms of reducing. So basically, a message of saying there is no one program that will reduce the risk to zero. Supportive evidence-based program can increase the prevention layer, and hopefully this is where we're going to go in all systematic approaches that are science-oriented. Next slide. This is a slide to remind you that this context of work is very important from a sustainable development goal perspective, because you're not only addressing your strategy of preventing drug use, you're addressing healthy and safe development of youth, which means you're taking many targets of the sustainable development goals at once. May it be the education, maybe the gender goal, may it be the violence SDG 16 goals, are all embedded in one strategy, and that's why the return on investment is high. And I will stop there by leaving the last slide, just in case there is any additional information needed by the participants. I'm happy to engage with it. And I pass the floor back to you, Chair. Thank you very much for the invite.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maalouf, for your really comprehensive presentation. I will omit myself from resuming it a little bit because you were a bit longer than we spoke. So for the future speakers, I will just make a short comment. I will appear again on video when 7 minutes are passed, so that you know that you are past your time, but really very interesting. Specifically, I like the correlations within SDGs, and also how prepared you were already on the issue of the COVID-19. So our second panelist is Mr. Matthew Kiefer. He is the seasoned director of educational programs with experience in the creation, implementation, and deployment of complex curricula products. Since 2010, he has been the global program manager of Lions Quest Educational Programs, which is a social and emotional learning program offering curriculum and professional development services to thousands of schools worldwide. Mr. Kiefer, you have the screen.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, and I thank you and your colleagues in the government of Slovenia for inviting us to join this panel. My name is Matt Kiefer, and I'm the manager of Lions Quest programs for Lions Clubs International Foundation, and I'll talk briefly about how we are using social and emotional learning as a tool for prevention. Next slide, please. Lions Quest is the flagship youth development program of the Lions Clubs International Foundation. We are part of the International Association of Lions Clubs, and an NGO with ECOSOC consultative status. We have more than 1.4 million members worldwide working on a variety of community improvement projects and service projects. Lions Quest is our main youth development tool based in social emotional learning. Next slide, please. I assume that many of you are at least somewhat familiar with social emotional learning, or SEL, so I won't spend a lot of time on what is SEL, but SEL provides an important framework for the work that we're doing with prevention and the broader youth outcomes we're seeking to address. And we focus on building skills within 5 key competencies, which you can see here on the wheel from our colleagues at the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. These competencies include relationship skills, responsible decision-making, self-awareness, social awareness, and self-management. And these skills provide the foundation for a number of things, including preventing negative behaviors, but also building up key protective factors, to go back to what my colleague and friend Wadih mentioned before. And these protective factors include developing strong bonds, both from amongst the peer group, as well as bonds with trusting adults, both in and outside of a school setting. Next slide, please. But again, to continue what my friend Wadih mentioned, we know that this sort of skill building does not happen just within a classroom or school setting, which is why we incorporate community and family activities such as service learning and parent meetings. And then in the instances where we've worked alongside UNODC and their work, we have seen work in parallel with strong families and the other parent and family engagement projects that UNODC supports. We have age-specific and age-appropriate content at all grades and age levels, which allows us to build a scaffolded approach, both for prevention specifically, but for the broader social emotional development of children. So what we're talking about with a 6-year-old is not the same as what we're talking about with a 16-year-old, but year over year, we are building upon the skills that were addressed in previous years. Next slide, please. We align with the international standards of drug use prevention in a number of ways, and 3 of those key ways include providing a sound theoretical base, and the pedagogic content is based on 30 plus years of research. We have seen evaluations of our program provide positive results both in controlled conditions but also in real world conditions, because we know that many educational interventions are evaluated under highly controlled circumstances, and the trade-off is that those do not reflect how programs like Lions Quest or others are implemented in the real world, which is much messier. It's much more complicated. We often do not have time to implement the full scope of the program the way we would prefer it to be implemented in a vacuum. And so what we allow for is adaptation for local conditions. And the work that we've done with UNODC in Southeast Europe and elsewhere has provided for that adaptation. And what we're working towards is hopefully in 2021, we can expand the work that we've done with UNODC in Southeast Europe to begin to include Slovenia. Next slide, please. Here we just have a quick view of our logic model. And if we look at that logic model, we see the necessary inputs as well as the short, medium, and long-term outcomes of the program. And it's important to note that while reduced drug and alcohol use we consider a longer-term outcome, there are important protective factors being built in the short and medium term, including improved attitudes and behaviors, as well as stronger connections with peers and with trusting adults, whether those be teachers or other staff in the school setting. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have independent worldwide research showing that implementing Lions Quest with fidelity produces a number of positive outcomes that support academic success, including reductions in bullying, increasing students' connectedness to school. We know that when students feel safe at school and that they feel like there is someone at that school who values them, that they are A, more likely to have improved academic outcomes, and B, less likely to fall into delinquent or dangerous behaviors, including drug and alcohol use. And so really the main, one of the main outcomes that we seek to build is healthy relationships both within the community, but particularly amongst the peer and the school group. Next slide, please. We seek to provide ongoing support in order to promote long-term success of the program, and we seek to do that in a number of ways, 4 of which are listed here in the circle, and these include tools to create a positive school climate, tools that are to address bullying, substance abuse prevention that are specifically addressed both within the curriculum, but also supported by parent and community engagement resources and activities, so that whatever is happening within the school setting is never done in a vacuum. It is done in support of broader community and family engagement initiatives. Next slide, please. As I conclude, and I thank the government of Slovenia again for the opportunity to speak here, please feel free to research the program and reach out to me at the email address. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the UNODC PTRS branch for their collaboration and the work that we've done both in Southeast Europe and in other regions around the world. And as I mentioned, we are very excited and optimistic about the possibility of expanding that work to Slovenia in the coming year, and I'm sure that we will be collaborating with many of the colleagues here on the event today in that effort. So my only the final slide is just a thank you slide. So Anya, if you want to show the smiling kid, that's fine. Otherwise, I will turn it back over to Madam Ambassador. Thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Kiefer, for your substantive presentation. What I have learned is what social and emotional learning is, how to support prevention, which inputs make more important outcomes, and the huge importance of parents, community, and school engagement. And of course, I'm happy that you are going to expand to Slovenia. Now I will give the screen to Ms. Vesna Pucelj. She's the National Coordinator of Health Education for Children and Adolescents at the Slovenian National Institute of Public Health. She specializes in health promotion and health education in primary health care and school settings, and also in evaluation of health promotion programs. Ms. Pucelj, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. First, hello to everyone, and thanks the organizer for the invitation and the opportunity to participate in this meeting. Together with my colleague, Zalka Drglin and Mojca Bevc, we would like to briefly introduce you our national program of health education within the health and school system and promotion of mental health of the family in its beginning. Next slide, please. In Slovenia, various free preventive health services and health education are provided in the public health system for all key target groups: pregnant women, parents-to-be, parents, children, and adolescents. Some of them are more vulnerable and need more intensive program for protection and promotion of health, which is provided for them. For example, breastfeeding counseling for mothers, program for more vulnerable family, health education for adolescents outside of school. Same of programs for health education and health promotion for children and adolescents are implemented in schools throughout school curriculum and as additional programs or activities. We would like to introduce you some of these aspects related to these programs. First, implementation of health education for children and adolescents in healthcare system, programs for more vulnerable pregnant women and family with babies, and cooperation between schools and local health centers in the network of health promoting schools. The National Institute of Public Health implements the education for health program for children and youngsters within the scope of primary health care for all key age groups: pregnant women, parents-to-be, parents, preschoolers, primary school pupils, secondary school students, teachers, and also youngsters outside schools, as we call dropouts. Health education is more than just sharing information. It is an active learning process that considers personal experience and socioeconomic factors. It aims to provide information and encourage individuals and groups to take care of their health. Activities are implemented in health clinics and in educational institutions, kindergartens and schools, as well as in local community. Next slide, please. Health education for preschool children, school children, and parents in health clinics is implemented during periodical health examination as an individual health education and or group works carried out by specially trained nurses or other health professionals, such as physiotherapists, medical doctors, psychologists, and so on. Health workers also work closely with almost every educational institution in Slovenia, kindergartens and schools, primary and secondary schools. Health education lessons implemented in educational institutions cover various aspects of maintaining good health. For example, topics on drugs, addiction, and risk behaviors are taught in 5th grade, and this issue is again indirectly addressed in later grades when children learn about growing up, positive self-esteem, interpersonal relations, and healthy sexuality. Health education is not implemented only for youngsters in school. In 2016, the health promotion program for youth from 15 to 25 years old who did not finish their regular schooling or are not employed, we also call them dropouts or NEET youth, was set a test program. The program has been designed in cooperation with the project Learning for Young Adults that evolves under the Slovenia Institute for Adult Education. In 2019, health education facilitators from health clinics connect with all organizations that currently implement the project Learning in Slovenia. Main topics in the health promotion program for the youth who did not finish schooling are mental health, self-esteem, anxiety, coping with stress, relaxing, anger management, and also healthy eating, physical activity, and drug and alcohol abuse, smoking, and so on. Next slide, please. Prenatal education for health for parents-to-be, previously named childbirth classes, is one of the health prevention programs organized in the form of 7 two-hour meetings in the community health center. All pregnant women and future fathers are invited. Expectant parents are taught new skills regarding childbirth, care of their own and the child health during pregnancy and after birth, care of the baby, communication with the baby, communication in partnership and family relationships. The goal is to empower them for healthy and satisfied family life. At the primary level of healthcare, we are introducing a breastfeeding counseling program. Health professionals with special competencies offer counseling by phone and face-to-face to mothers who are experiencing acute or persistent breastfeeding problems. The nature of those programs requires timely, professional, compassionate, and accessible advice and support, which certified lactation consultants are offering. Now, we are developing intensive home visiting program named First 1000 Days from Pregnancy to Early Childhood for more vulnerable pregnant women and families with babies, which are facing challenges, for example, mental health problems, addiction, domestic violence, poverty, and so on. Its aim is to strengthen the safe attachment and parental skills, support short-term or long-term physical and mental health and quality of life, and to prevent transgenerational transmission of trauma. The program will be implemented at home in the form of professional support to the family and with the appropriate complementarity support from the health, social, and other services according to the specific issue. Next slide, please. And finally, a few words about Slovenia network of health promoting schools. As an upgrade to the cooperation of health professionals with schools, in Slovenia we have a network of schools known as the Slovenia Network of Health Promoting Schools. Network is working with the support of Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education since 1993. We are one of the first members of the European Network of Health Promoting Schools. Slovenia Network connect about 400 institutions, which represent 71% of all primary and 34% of all secondary schools. They follow national and international guidelines and principles of health promotion for children and adolescents. Health promoting schools address this principle by systematically planning and evaluating school activities, school rules, and other activities that support health. They implement a setting approach to health, look for opportunity for better health in school environment. Health content is supported through the curricula with various project activities by encouraging parents, local community, and health services for participations. Diverse activities are mainly aimed at raising awareness of students, teachers, and parents about healthy eating, promoting physical activity in school and outside schools, strengthening mental health, and other topics that promote a healthy lifestyle of children and adolescents, for example, drug prevention, promotion of safety, and so on. In the next slide, there is also some links for our of programs that I presented. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank you, Ms. Pucelj, very much for your interesting presentation. What I heard of was importance of accurate and clear information getting to the parents, children, and adolescents. And based on this info, they can decide on healthy lifestyle. I'm also happy that we have a network of health promoting schools and that all education already starts in prenatal period and that we all have to cooperate. Thank you very much. Let's move on to our next panelist, which is Ms. Breda Jelen-Sobočan. She's a psychiatrist, psychotherapist, and family therapist with several decades of experience in psychotherapeutic work with individuals, groups, and couples. She's a member of a group for infant observation where she coordinates the preparatory work of psychotherapists and other experts that are engaged in the field of mental health. Ms. Jelen-Sobočan, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Thank you. It has been known for decades that early nursing experiences have a significant impact on the development of an individual and shape the inborn characteristics which the baby brings into the world. We are all like premature baby at birth. Every person's brain is extremely immature, and at that time, it is crucially developed during the first years of their life. Strong connections are formed among the neurons, which are created based on the experiences gained from the primary relationship with the caregiver. In developmental neuroscience, the saying "fire together, wire together" is commonly used. The early relationships are social incubator, where on the intersubjective basis, the neurobiological, psychological, social, and cognitive essence of an individual is created. Parents are faced with an extremely demanding task for which they need optimum support of the social environment. Few communities throughout history truly understood and took advantage of the potential of good early care for the welfare of an individual as well as society. A vast majority of these findings are denied by the society, which is profit-oriented and mainly interested in only the economical value of life. A young mother, young parents is expected to play their part in society, which is full of competitive obligations, while at the same time they create the future of their child in society throughout their care. In that way, the current social conditions, relations, and values of each individual social environment enter the developing mind and brain of a child through mothering. It's not a question of nature or nurture, as both are equally important. William Wordsworth wrote a poem with the following verse: "The child is father of the man." Childhood experiences characterized by insufficient care and tuning all through to the abuse in the relationship with the caregiver lead to character development. A child develops his or her potential as an interpersonal response to the care provided by the parents. A good enough parenting is one where the parents are responsive to the needs of a child, where the parents see their child as the separate being with their own needs and their own inner world, and they help the child regulate the physiological, psychological states. Consequently, the securely attached child is able to develop the highest ability of constructive self-regulation on the one hand, while also the ability to connect with others and thus achieve the regulation of inner states in his or her social contexts too. An individual with a positive early experiences, which were attuned to his or her nature, develops the optimal level of resilience, a genuine self, curiosity, empathy, and creativity. On the other hand, a child with a negative early experience develops a defensive personality organization, which is more or less distorted. Such viewpoint on life, which is poorly adapted to reality, such understanding of oneself as well as others, and such behavior help him or her survive in her early years and maintain the relationship with the caregiver who is not good enough. To maintain this primary relationship with the caregiver is of vital importance to a child. It is of greater importance than optimal development. Later, this organization of psyche becomes what we call maladaptation. Care, which is just enough out of tune, can lead to a fragmentation to the self and its sense of internal continuity and coherence. This prevents the child from optimally adapting to the external environment and stress which he or she must cope with. This early stage of the first few years has an uneven, fateful impact on the entire life of person, as these years are central to development of a person's physiological implicit core personality structure and their psychological defense against anxiety, shame, failure, the feeling of unworthiness, incompetence, the feeling of being unwanted, against the fear of annihilation and other primitive fears. A child with no safe haven is extremely oversensitive to the mere trace of these effects throughout of his or her life. The current time of pandemic forces parents into a truly difficult situation concerning the material, social, and physical welfare. Even in the times of peace and security, we could observe that many couples were unable to handle a good enough parenting which was in tune with their child. What can we, both individually or as society, do for the good of the families, for the good for every single baby, every single premature future man or woman? The best answer lies in the famous African proverb, "It takes a village to raise a child." Thank you for your listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sobochan, for your insightful presentation. What I have heard, and I completely agree, is that parenting is an extremely demanding task, and we need help, and that childhood experience is of great importance. Let us continue to our last but not least important speaker, Ms. Sanela Talic. She is the General Secretary and Head of Prevention Programs at the Institute Utrip. She has extensive knowledge and experience in the field of prevention science and practice, social and emotional learning, and public health advocacy. She is a PhD candidate in prevention science at the University of Zagreb. She is also the recipient of the 2020 Society for Prevention Research International Award. Ms. Talic, you have the screen.
Madam Ambassador, thank you. I hope you hear me. Yeah, probably yes. So, and thanks to all participants that are still here with me. So this is a very important, for me, side event with a very important topic. Next slide, please. And I thought that I should start it with, and just press once again, please. Yes, thank you. I should start, or could start, with the old Chinese proverb: when is the right time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. So the same goes for social emotional learning or prevention in general. When was the right time to start with systemic approach? Well, 20 years ago. The COVID situation, and even before, gave me lots of opportunities for a reflection on the work we as prevention workers do in our field. And I have a feeling that we constantly react to challenges that appear in real life, and we are not really taking the proactive role. It's a pity, because as we heard from my previous colleagues who presented their contents, we have a science as a good ground for what we do in practice. Yeah, we were listening about how many ready-to-use materials we have, programs, also policy recommendations, words like, theory-based, then logic models, vulnerability framework, and UNODC approach in the standards they showed us, where the focus is on personal growth in different developmental stages. And this indicates the need for systemic approach. As we as human beings grow, also challenges grow during the life course, and so have to our skills and competencies. Next slide, please. I think we have chosen a fantastic title for our event, especially this part, not merely an intervention. Because families and schools, so parents and teachers, are the most targeted settings or socialization agents. And as we heard, we're having in mind that being a teacher nowadays or being a parent, this is a demanding job. And imagine us coming to schools, to families, presenting a new program. And it happens in our reality, in our practice, in our experience, that these programs are considered as additional work, an additional burden. And if I could read their minds, probably I would find there something like, this too shall pass someday. Because in many cases, teachers or families are obliged to do something. So as this picture indicates, the last one, we have those programs like a living monument to temporary knowledge. Next slide, please. I think one of the first steps, in systemic approach should be improving our literacy in the field of social emotional learning or in prevention in general. When we say that we talk about early prevention, we all should know what this means and what we should talk about, right? And, improving literacy, which is also will be the theme in my PhD thesis or in my PhD work, we should improve knowledge, motivation, our competencies, in order to access the right information, to understand information, evaluate it and use it, on the basis of that to form judgment and make decisions, in order to improve the goals that we set for our target groups, right? And social emotional learning, if we talk about it today, is constantly happening in everyday life, in the classroom, right? And it is often a hidden part, or the part of a hidden curriculum. And there is nothing to be hidden when we talk about social emotional learning. We have to make social emotional learning a big thing, to make it visible and intentional. It is like we, write a goal. We will teach children to count to 10. We should specify and write down the goal, like we will teach children to name the emotion, to recognize the emotion, to regulate the emotion, etc. So, and we should not rely with the hidden curriculum. We should not rely on hope, because hope is not really a good strategy, especially when talking about such an important thematic. Next slide, please. So if we go back to our first slide, again, please. When is the right time to plant a tree? The second best time is now. Taking into account, again, all the existing knowledge that is somewhere out there, it is really time, and the COVID situation showed us to start as soon as possible. The states, I believe, have been doing lots of things, also quality things based on the science. And we should, as a first step, capitalize all that and improve our approaches. Next slide. Maybe it would be helpful when we talk about systemic approach to look into products that already exist. So this is just one example. It's not how the things you should do it, but it's just one example. This is a product making social and emotional learning visible. Those are policy recommendations that were produced during our previous project, Learning to Be, in the field of social emotional learning. And we developed a set of policy recommendations. Those, as you can see, address different settings or levels, from classroom, school, municipal, state, and European. And it states, and there are many recommendations how school can develop and nurture cell culture in schools, or how can municipal or state authorities contribute or support social and emotional learning. Next slide, please. The next very useful framework can be also the one that you can find in UNODC international standards. There is a beautiful schematic representation of a national drug prevention system. You can freely remove the word drug and you have it, something to start to work on. And existing frameworks, which is a very important aspect, really include different levels like social, educational, and health, and different stakeholders. But, next slide, please, or you have to press twice. But we should not forget that the human capital is in front line in the process of diffusion of innovations, different innovations like programs, interventions, etc. And that working with children and people require high emotional labor. And this is why we joined a new European initiative, Teaching to Be, where we will design an online well-being course with the aim to support teachers' professional growth and well-being, because without teachers' well-being, we cannot count on student well-being. Yeah, you can follow us on Facebook and also see the progress of the project. And the last slide, please. Many existing frameworks that we can start with. And it only takes the decision that cell or early prevention, or whatever we call it, is really of great importance. So not only decision, but concrete further steps like strategic planning involving different stakeholders, etc. And I have a feeling that with this event and the one of the previous events on social emotional learning is really actually stepping into the new era when talking about social and emotional learning. And I believe we will continue this way. So thank you for your attention.
I thank you very much, Ms. Talic, for your substantive presentation. And I completely agree, we shouldn't just react. We should be forward-looking and start as soon as possible. If already not 20 years ago, as you said, there is a need for knowledge, motivation, and competencies, and the importance of family. We have spoken before, but now we also spoke a little bit more about the huge importance of schools and teachers and educating them properly on these topics as well. So thank you very much. Now, after all these interesting and thought-provoking presentations, unfortunately, I have to say that we have left without time for questions. Some of them have already left because they have to go to another side event. So I will just conclude at this point. Before concluding, I would like to express that despite 9 parallel events, we nearly had 100 participants, nearly like the last year. There was a request for presentation, so I would ask you to scroll a little bit up. There is an email of Anne Corsica to whom you can send requests for presentations, and she will then forward them to you. But to conclude, for all of us that are still here, I would just like to express my sincere gratitude to all of you for attending the side event, and I would hope that it would be active participation also from the ones who haven't been panelists, but unfortunately we are without of time. But I would like to thank the panelists. I really enjoyed your presentations, and I will reread them, and I will pass the message also to other people. So with this, our event came to an end. Thank you again for valuable contributions, and see you next year with another interesting topic. Thank you very much and goodbye.